You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday 8th of August 2014. Maldon kebab house faces £60,000 fine after illegal worker raid. Hurricane Bertha set to strike UK, bringing a month's rain in a few hours. George Galloway under investigation over Israel remarks. Islam does not belong in German society, according to Stern magazine poll. Iraq conflict resounds on German streets as Yazidi clash with ISIS supporters. Ebola outbreak, Spain to accept Europe's first confirmed case of the virus. An interview with Nick Griffin. Ebola's spread to US inevitable, says CDC chief. Angry Palestinians attack Hamas official over Gaza destruction, and France shows Hamas rocket launcher near homes. ISIS overtakes Iraq's largest Christian city. And finally, old-timers sex, too funny to be naughty. UK news. Maldon kebab house faces £60,000 fine after illegal worker raid. 3 suspected illegal workers have been arrested after a raid on a kebab house in Maldon, Essex. Officers detained 3 Turkish men aged 20, 22 and 43 after intelligence led them to Maldon King Kebab House in Maldon High Street on July 31st. The 20-year-old was released while his case has progressed, while a 22-year-old and 43-year-old were detained pending removal. The business could be liable for a civil penalty of up to £20,000 per illegal worker arrested if proof is not provided that the correct right to work checks were carried out. World at 8. Compared to the number of illegal workers we have in this country, the numbers of deportations is pathetic. They need to be stopped before they can join their own ethnic or religious communities and get lost. The Brits are too frightened to be anything near efficient. Hurricane Bertha set to strike UK, bringing a month's rain in a few hours. Nearly a month's rain could fall in just a few hours in parts of Britain this weekend as the remnants of Hurricane Bertha blow across the Atlantic. Forecasters now believe there is a 60% chance that Hurricane Bertha's last gasp will arrive in the south on Sunday, putting a stop to the recent glorious weather. Severe weather warnings have been issued across the southeast with strong winds, torrential rain and large waves expecting to batter the region for most of the day. The Met Office has also issued a severe warning for Friday when another band of low pressure stretching from London to Manchester is set to bring up to 1.9 inches of rain in some areas. World at 8. Oh dear, local flooding for all. That'll teach us to build on arable land or floodplains or denude the landscape of trees and vegetation, won't it? Or will it? Galloway under investigation over Israel remarks. Calls by George Galloway for Bradford to be declared an Israel-free zone are being investigated by West Yorkshire Police. Officers said 2 complaints have been made about a speech he made urging the city to reject all Israeli goods, services, academics and even tourists. A spokesman for the Bradford West MP said he stood by his remarks. Conservative MP Robert Halfon dismissed them as an ill-considered rant that will cause great offence to many. But David Ward, Lib Dem MP for neighbouring Bradford East, said Israel Free Zone was a nice soundbite, but any boycott had to be UK-wide. World at 8. A good boycott would be against Chinese and goods from the Far East, which are costing us dear and are simply no good. As for the shrimps from Thailand, avoid them like the plague. European news. Islam does not belong in German society, according to Stern magazine poll. A majority of Germans have rejected former President Christian Wulff's famous statement that Islam is now also a part of Germany, with 52% against that idea. Just 44% of people surveyed by the Forsa Opinion Institute for Stern magazine agreed with the former head of state that Islam was part of Germany. However, a second question asking how people thought Germany should deal with hostility to Muslims found that 53% of people believed it should be treated as seriously as anti-Semitism. Young people and supporters of the Green Party were most likely to look favourably on Islam, with 61% and 69% positive responses respectively. 50% of centre-left Social Democrat (SPD) supporters agreed Islam belonged in German society, while the Conservatives' CDU/CSU's number was just 36%. People in East Germany and the over 60s are amongst the least likely to agree. Only 31% of Easterners and 39% of seniors sided with Wolf. The least welcoming to Islam were respondents close to the Eurosceptic party Alternative for Deutschland, 82% of whom did not think Islam was part of a German society. But a majority of 57% of AfD supporters still thought that hostility to Muslims was as serious as hatred against Jews. World at 8. How about the hatred that Islam has for the Jewish people? How do they rate that with being colonised on a large scale by Muslims? Now that survey would be worth listening to. Iraq conflict resounds on German streets as Yazidi clash with ISIS supporters. The Iraq conflict spilled onto the streets of Herford in North Rhine-Westphalia on Wednesday evening as hundreds of members of the Yazidi faith clashed with supporters of Islamic terrorist group ISIS. Around 300 Yazidi took to the streets in the early evening. They were demonstrating against the attacks on members of their faith in Syria and Iraq and a religiously motivated attack against their community earlier that day, Hereford police reported. The police decided to intervene after a large group of hooded people started attacking passers-by in the town centre, with at least one person injured. The police used pepper spray to control the mob, confiscating tools and one firearm, and took details of 86 people involved. World at 8. Soon to come to an area near you. Ebola outbreak. Spain to accept Europe's first confirmed case of the virus. Miguel Parares, 75, a Spanish missionary priest working at a hospital in the West African country, will be taken to Spain by a military jet. Spain has been preparing to accept Europe's first confirmed case of the Ebola virus. A medically equipped military jet has been sent to Liberia to repatriate Miguel Parares, 75, a Spanish missionary priest working at a hospital in the West African country. World at 8. And yet still in Europe we are allowing migrants from Ebola-infested countries like Guinea, which has had Ebola since February. Just how many migrants have we taken in since then? This needs to be addressed not with financial aid or help, but firstly with completely cutting off immigration from those countries to Europe and the UK, but that is now too late. Now we have an interview with Nick Griffin today, and we talk about the creeping Islamification of this country and the plight of Christians in Iraq, amongst other little gems of information. Good afternoon, Nick. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Lynne.
That's lovely. I'm welcoming you back to World at 8. And I've got several questions we want to sort of run by you and have a chat about. One is the very important question of the creeping Islamification of this country. It doesn't seem to be creeping anymore. Actually, it seems to be taking quite giant steps.
Yeah, it's galloping. Obviously, it's very much in the news at present. We've rolled on from the Birmingham and other towns' Trojan horse story, which, of course, only a few months ago, this was a sort of rumour on the internet. We were approached, our first Alwyn Deacon, then myself, talking to a former Muslim and several, in fact, Muslim parents in the Birmingham area who were horrified at what was being done by the radicals there. No one were paying any attention to them. And then, obviously, finally it broke through into the news, so it became a big issue. But that's only a tip of the iceberg. We've got two very good campaigns by our people, one up in Bolton and one down in Croydon, against big mosque developments proposed in their own areas. So, it's constantly being pushed and promoted and, of course, encouraged, particularly by Labour councils. But our people are doing a very good job helping to organise, local resistance.
Oh, good.
In both cases, they've got petitions signed by several thousand local people against the mosques. So people are, I think, wide awake. And I guess from today's headlines, they're going to be even more so.
Yes, exactly. The flag over East London, wonderful.
Yes, the Jihad flag in East London. This is actually the second manifestation of this in just the last week or so. There's some very frightening footage, really, from shot in the Blackwall Tunnel at the end of last month, after a pro-Gaza demo. As a matter of fact, I fully support the rights of the Palestinians in Gaza to a proper state and to an end to the appalling blockade against them and what's ethnic cleansing by a very radical form of Zionism. But having said that, the scenes at the end of the last one of those demonstrations, when a very significant number of young British Muslims basically blockaded the Black Tunnel with Islamic State flags and jihad flags, it really was pretty scary. I don't think that particularly hit the news.
No, it didn't.
I believe RT ran it. Of course, if you want to see what's going on in Britain, you have to watch
Russia Today.
But other than that, it didn't really hit the news. But this one has now. The Guardian broke the story yesterday that the Will Crooks estate in Poplar High Street has got a black flag of jihad flying outside its entrance. And the police have said they've had a few questions, but they're not doing anything. They haven't had any complaints. So the flag is still hanging there. Quite remarkable.
Doesn't that incite religious hatred?
Well, I certainly think it does.
Yeah.
When you consider you consider first of all that from the Middle East, Syria, both the Syrian government and what's left of the so-called moderate rebels have both said that the most violent and bloodthirsty of the criminal gangs of foreigners in the Islamic State and similar groups are from Britain. So when you consider there's hundreds of British, in inverted commas, volunteer jihadists murdering and executing their way across the Middle East right now, while their younger brothers and their cousins and so on are following everything they do on Facebook and Twitter, and are very excited about this in places like East London. To allow a flag like that to fly without being taken down, well, it's a symptom of, yet again, our authorities completely having lost the will to govern.
Well, you're absolutely right. It has, and it's also endemic of this awful Ebola business. I mean, we're not stopping any air traffic in from West Africa. We're not stopping people coming in. We're not stopping the migrants coming to Italy and then coming straight into the UK diseased, though a few of them might be. And I just don't understand it.
No, finally, I gather yesterday that British Airways have finally halted flights to a couple of the most affected places out of concern for the safety of their own crews.
Yeah.
It's good, but what on earth was the government doing leaving it up to an airline instead of simply saying, the borders are shut to anyone who's come from any of those parts of Africa?
Exactly.
From now for the duration, because this really clearly is really a terrifying disease. And shutting the borders to Africa and so on wouldn't necessarily keep it out forever, but the longer it's kept out, the more chance there is of coming up with a vaccine and a cure.
Exactly, and I think the actual airline was only worried about the tourists. I mean, and you can imagine there's still British tourists going over there. I just don't understand this at all. I mean, you wouldn't see my bum for dust. Anything with an Ebola thing on it, I'd be out there. Because we know they wouldn't bother with the elderly, would they, Nick?
Possibly not, Lynn.
No, they wouldn't. So we've got flags flying over the East End.
Flag tolerance. Interesting. I looked up the Will Crooks estate, and Will Crooks was the first Labour mayor of Poplar. He was only the fourth Labour MP of all. He was a very patriotic, one of the early patriotic socialists, who'd be horrified of what his Labour Party has become and what it's done to the working people of East London in particular.
Indeed.
He was a militant campaigner for workers' pensions, an all-round good chap, I would say, and to have his name besmirched in this way by this hideously intolerant form of radical Islam, it really is a crying shame.
It's just absolutely disgusting, and I think I can safely say, Nicholas, I think we're the only country in the world, really, that this has happened to.
Oh, no, Lynn, no.
Isn't it?
Oh, it's in the papers today that the crown of being the most terror-ridden country in Europe has moved from Britain and Londonistan now to France. Sweden, Stockholm is basically an Islamic city. Copenhagen in Denmark only last year was surrounded by a ring of burning suburbs as militant young Muslims kicked off. No, it's not Britain. It's
everywhere.
It's not everywhere. No, it's not particularly in China. It's not in India.
No.
It's not in Africa. Africa is, other than areas where the Muslims are running riot.
Yeah.
Africa is for Africans. Asia is for Asians. But Britain and the rest of the white world, we're for everybody.
Apparently they're about something like 80 million in Europe.
So apparently so, yeah, and of course rising all the time.
Exactly, rising all the time. Now another question another discussion we should have is about the Christians in Iraq, the persecution thereof, because they are seriously under threat. And
yes.
For it to reach the media, it must be bad, because let's face it, the media don't publish anything pro-Christian and anti-Muslim anyway.
No, it clearly is. It's a genocidal level of cleansing against the Christians and other minorities as well. A basically Zoroastrian sect called the Yazidis.
Yazidis, yes.
Who are hated, I think, even more than the Christians, if that's possible. But all given at best the choice, convert or die.
Yeah. And
it's truly terrifying. Obama, of course, has now apparently authorised airstrikes against the Islamic Jihad people. It would have been a good idea if he'd stepped in a year ago and stopped the CIA training these bastards in Jordan, which is what they were doing.
Yes.
So it's another example of US blowback, it warrants looking at from a nationalist perspective, because obviously one has to be incredibly sorry for these Christians and other minorities risking these people. And some of the papers are saying, Britain should be moving in, we should be joining in the airstrikes. And we have to say no. It's not for us to interfere in the Middle East. It's not for us to send our troops or to spend our money getting involved in someone else's civil war. If there's one thing that Britain should do, it's to stop interfering. In particular, the biggest interference that we've done in the Middle East really ever, and it goes back a long, long way, the British and the Americans created the House of Saud as the government of Saudi Arabia. And if anyone is serious about dealing with Islamist terrorism, the answer is regime change in Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
Because it's Saudi Arabia, which is, with a little help from its baby brother Qatar, that's where all the money comes from.
Oh, yes.
For the jihadists. That's where the arms comes from. That's where the pressure comes from. And if it wasn't for the fact that people like Obama and Cameron and all the rest of them are in the pockets of various Saudi princelings, then I've no doubt that they would say, if we're actually going to get serious about defeating this Islamist jihad, we need to take out the countries which are funding it. Saudi Arabia is at the top of the list.
I think you're right, and also, I mean, the nauseating article in the Daily Mail earlier this week, showing pictures of these Saudi women all veiled up to the whatsits with their huge, expensive cars and spending millions and millions of pounds in London. And I thought, I just don't understand this. We're just giving them publicity. It's awful.
It's money talks and bullshit walks.
Exactly. And added to that, of course, the one reason the British people are helping them is sending out the so-called British-born fighters to fight with these bastards.
Yes. Yeah, sure.
Which doesn't help.
They can have some more of those if they want.
They can have actually all of them, and all their families actually would be quite good. But oh dear! Now we're onto the what I think is probably the final one, or perhaps not. And it's actually it does come down from the subject of Islam, which is intolerance. And this thing intolerant, the Muslims, the only thing the Muslims and the Christians have in common should be a vague intolerance of the rise of the homosexual militant brigade, as you say, the hetero-phobic triumphalism, which is even reaching infant schools now, which I think is absolutely terrible. Yes. And it's the one thing that should actually link the two religions, but it doesn't.
No. Well, let's get one thing straight, and that's that from a British nationalist perspective, a state which has the power to peer into people's bedrooms and to interfere in affairs of the heart is a state that's too powerful.
Yes.
What people who happen to be gay do in the privacy of their own homes is no concern of us.
No.
And the idea that people should be persecuted for their sexuality is monstrous. That's the first thing to get very, very clear.
No, agreed.
Having said that, as you say, the phrase you used there, hetero-phobic triumphalism, what we've now got from the militant homosexual lobby, and I know several gay members of the BNP who are disgusted with what's done in their name.
Yeah.
But these people who actually, they hate heterosexuals, they call us breeders.
Oh dear.
And
only.
They are particularly keen on sexualising young children, primary school children, infant school children.
Yeah.
And any time someone says, no, that's wrong, immediately they scream, oh, this is homophobia. No, it most definitely isn't. homophobia is saying that people should be persecuted for what they are,
Yeah.
which was actually the British National Party's position when I took it over.
Mm.
And I changed that over the years. And it's now, I think, very well established that our position, as I said, is that the state shouldn't interfere in
Yeah.
people's private lives. But what we've now got is the state and the mass media interfering on behalf of this militant homosexual lobby.
Yeah.
The latest example was in the Commonwealth Games,
Oh.
when they had the gay actor John Barrowman performing a new style of Glasgow kiss, and kissing one of the male performers in public. Now, again, what he does in his private life is one thing,
Yeah.
but he's used consistently, and I think he's very happy to be used, as a way of promoting this homosexual agenda as not as an acceptable lifestyle, or a valid lifestyle, but actually something to be held up and looked at in awe.
Yeah.
And you actually begin to understand to some extent why the Muslims hold us in such contempt. That a society which has basically given up breeding holds gay actors up as role models instead of young mums up as role models.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to persecute gay actors, but they shouldn't be role models. Role models are youngsters having families, ideally as a married couple, because although lots of marriages don't work and there's all sorts of problems there, the simple statistical fact is that the safest place for children to grow up and the best place for children to grow up
in a marriage
development is in a marriage which has to be between a man and a woman, and anything else other than a man and a woman is not the rights of others. It's a deliberate subversive attack on the sanctity of marriage, and therefore it's not about the rights of homosexuals. It's about taking away the rights of little children to their best chance in life.
Yeah.
And it's a wicked agenda. Let's not beat about the bush. It's a wicked agenda which verges on the edge of satanic. And
Yes, it does.
we're the only people who stood up to it, and I hope very much that the party will continue the position that respecting the rights of adults to do whatever they want in the privacy of their own homes. Actually, let's face it, if the Muslims take over and we're the only ones who'll stop them,
Yeah.
we'll stone the homosexuals to death as soon as look at them.
Oh, yes, they will.
It's because that's what they want. So
No
bizarre.
compunction.
For all that we're accused of being homophobic, we're the only people who actually would protect the rights of homosexuals in this country, because the Muslims sure as hell won't, and everyone else is surrendering to the Muslims as quick as they possibly can.
Yes.
So it's a very, very strange thing. So I repeat once again, when I criticise, and when this party criticises the militant gay lobby, we are not being anti-homosexual.
No.
We're being pro-majority, pro-heterosexual, and above all, pro-children.
Well, it's actually reverting to old standards, and old Christian standards maybe, or even old pagan standards. But it's still a good thing, because I think once a certain, what they class as an alternative lifestyle, it is no longer that, as you say, and once they put their relationships in public, that becomes an object of the public and an object of children to look at.
Yes.
And they're taking it out of the privacy of their own homes, in which I agree with you totally. People are entitled to do what they want, with whom, whenever they like, behind their closed doors. I don't necessarily want to know about it.
That's the thing. That's the thing exactly. Yes.
I don't care enough to know about it, and I certainly don't want to know about it.
Like I say, this isn't a matter of rights. This is the social Marxist attack on tradition, Christianity, and the basic fundamental decency of our civilization. And above all else, it's a deliberate attack on the family, because one of Marx's and Engels' one of the foundations of the Communist Manifesto was the destruction of the family.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
And that is what this is all about. And I hope that anyone that's listening to this, to whom this is new, will then Google social Marxism, Google the Frankfurt School, have a read, educate yourself, and pass your knowledge on, because knowledge is power.
Exactly. And on that happy note, Nick, I will love and leave you.
Thank you, Lynn, but not in public.
No, not in public. No, behind closed doors. Behind closed doors.
Righty-ho. Speak to you again soon.
Have a lovely weekend.
Bye.
Bye-bye. World news. Ebola spreads to US inevitable, says CDC chief. Ebola's spread to the United States is inevitable due to the nature of global airline travel, but any outbreak is not likely to be large, US health authorities said Thursday. Already one man with dual US-Liberian citizenship has died from Ebola after becoming sick on a plane from Monrovia to Lagos and exposing as many as 7 other people in Nigeria. More cases of Ebola moving across borders via air travel are expected as West Africa faces the largest outbreak of the hemorrhagic virus in history, said Tom Frieden, head of the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The virus spreads by close contact with bodily fluids and has killed 932 people and infected more than 1,700 since March in Sierra Leone, Guinea, Nigeria and Liberia. World at 8. And we are still taking in their doctors and nurses, which they need over there. I know that this particular outbreak was not reported in European media until virtually a done deal. It just shows what the establishment think of the average Englishman on the street. Absolutely nothing, and in fact worth less than an immigrant African carrying a disease. Now you know your true value to this and other governments. Angry Palestinians attack Hamas official over Gaza destruction and France shows Hamas rocket launcher near homes. Hamas spokesman beaten by Gaza residents who blames Hamas for the killing and destruction they suffered. Palestinian Arab sources said Tuesday that Gaza residents attacked Hamas spokesman Sami Abu Zuri Saturday evening near the Shifa hospital. Abu Zuri had arrived at the hospital for an interview with a news outlet. The residents blamed Hamas for the death of family members and for destruction of their homes. Armed Hamas terrorists from the Izzedine al-Qassam brigades extricated Abu Zuri and arrested the angry residents. As if that weren't enough, France 24 published footage of a Hamas rocket launching pad that appears to show that the Islamist militant group has been firing from areas heavily populated with civilians. France 24 correspondent Gallagher Fenwick says the site in Gaza City is some 50 metres, less than 165 feet, from a hotel where the majority of international media is staying. It also lies just 100 metres from a UN building clearly marked with a trademark light blue flag. Children can be seen playing on and near the rocket launchers. World at 8, and I am in receipt of a picture that shows a double bed in a home in Gaza stacked with guns, missiles and small rockets. Hamas is a terrorist organisation and they usually terrorise their own people first. ISIS overtakes Iraq's largest Christian city. Karakosh, Iraq's largest Christian town, has been virtually overrun by the same militant Islamists who have gained a foothold in parts of eastern Syria and western and northern Iraq. The latest advance by ISIS, or the Islamic State formerly known as the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, has caused thousands of Christians in the city to flee, just as other minority groups targeted by ISIS have done, as well as Shiite Muslims. The French government confirmed that the Iraqi city of Karakosh has fallen into the hands of the militant Al-Qaeda offshoot. France called for an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council to discuss the threat in Iraq. Karakosh is the historic Assyrian town of 50,000 people, approximately 20 miles southeast of Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, where ISIS also has control. When ISIS took over Mosul, many residents from there had fled to Karakosh. In Mosul, ISIS issued an ultimatum to Christians living there: convert to Islam, pay a fine or face death by the sword. World at 8. And what will the UN or NATO do to help the Christians? Bugger all, actually. It's all in the plan for the Middle East Eurabia. They killed Saddam for killing the Kurds, but they are not killing ISIS for killing Christians. And finally, old-timers sex. This is too funny to be dirty, so enjoy it. The husband leans over and asks his wife, "Do you remember the first time we had sex together over 50 years ago? We went behind the village tavern where you leaned against the back of the fence and I made love to you." "Yes," she said, "I remember it well." "OK," he says, "how about taking a stroll around there again and we can do it for old time's sake?" "Oh, Jim, you old devil, that sounds like crazy, but a good idea." A police officer sitting in the booth next door heard their conversation and, having a chuckle to himself, thought, "I've got to see these two old-timers having sex against a fence. I'll just keep an eye on them so there's no trouble." So he followed them. The elderly couple walked haltingly along, leaning on each other for support, aided by walking sticks. Finally they get to the back of the tavern and make their way to the fence. The old lady lifts her skirt and the old man drops his trousers. As she leans against the fence, the old man moves in. Then suddenly they erupt into the most furious sex that the policeman has ever seen. This goes on for about 10 minutes while they're both making loud noises and moaning and screaming. Finally they both collapse panting on the ground. The policeman is amazed. He thinks he's learnt something about life and old age that he didn't know. After about half an hour of lying on the ground recovering, the old couple struggle to their feet and straighten their clothes. The policeman is still watching and thinks to himself, this is truly amazing. I've got to ask them what their secret is. So as the couple pass by, he says to them, "Excuse me, but that was something else. You must have had a fantastic sex life together. Is there some sort of secret to this?" Shaking, the old man is barely able to reply. 50 years ago that wasn't an electric fence. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynne Mozar, and I and the team at World at 8 and Radio Britain wish you all a very happy and a very safe weekend.